Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Cambridgeshire County Council's Constitution and Ethics Committee meeting. As you know, the County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, however, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? You'll be aware this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit, which is through the middle doors on my left, and assemble in the car park. So we move to item 1, which is the apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Bird, and Councillor Machini is here as a sub. Councillor Dupre and Councillor Coots is here as a sub. Councillor Maguire and Councillor Goldsack is here as a sub, and Councillor Sanderson and Councillor Taylor is here. Thank you.
Splendid. Thank you very much, everybody, for stepping in. Can I ask now if any member of the committee wishes to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? There being none, we move on to the next item, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of June 2023. And I would like to ask for approval of these minutes of the last scheduled meeting. Any issues? Anybody proposing? Councillor Wilson, seconding. Councillor Ambrose Smith, all in favour? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 3, which is the annual review of the Constitution. So if I could ask, please, the Service Director of Legal and Governance, Ms. Duncan, to introduce it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report is the annual review of the Constitution. As the title makes clear, it's something we do every year. So during the course of the year, we may identify issues with the Constitution which need review over time, and we bring a report back to committee really to seek committee's approval on proposed way forwards or to seek their view on them. So we have a number of items which we'd like you to have a think about at this committee meeting. I'll quickly run through them. Some of them are very straightforward and some of them are a little bit more difficult. The first one is the consultation process on delegated decisions. So at the moment, officers exercising a delegated decision have a consultation requirement with the chair and the vice chair of the committee. Now, that isn't normally an issue for us. It's not normally a problem, and certainly we'd want to keep to that. But we have had instances where we haven't, because of holiday periods, we haven't been able to contact one of the members concerned, and that has held up the decision-making process. So the first proposed amendment is to allow a consultation where a member is absent with one or the other of the members. So there would still be member consultation, but simply if one is absent, the consultation with the other one would suffice. The next point is relates to attendance of county councillors at committee meetings. This is really to put in place something which is fairly standard practice in other places, which if members were not able to attend a committee as a local member, that they would be allowed to, via the chair, make a contribution via a written format, an email or a note. So we're suggesting that that's put in place just to make that clear so that members can contribute in a written format if they're unable to attend as a local member. We think that gives local members a voice. Sometimes they can't always attend every single meeting, and I think that as an officer, we'd like to make sure that local members can still make their position clear at committee meetings via a written statement if necessary. The third item relates to public questions or petitions in the last 6 months. Members may be familiar with the provision in relation to the 6-month rule, where questions are refused if they've been asked in substantially the same format in the past 6 months. That means that where we have a limited space on agendas for public questions, that we get a broad range of public questions because we deal with it on the first come first served basis, and we could potentially have the same question being asked at every meeting if we didn't have this rule. So in terms of what is suggested, we are proposing that we extend that to all the council's committees rather than just meetings of the council. So that's the third one in relation to that. The social media aspect relates to very straightforward. We're just taking out, I think it's not Twitter anymore, it's X, isn't it? So we're out of date already on that, but because we've got a number of other social media outlets as well, we're proposing just to delete that element of it. The terms of reference of the Asset and Procurement Committee, I think this is an oversight when the terms of reference were established. At the moment, the committee's terms of reference limit it to, or rather require that any decision over £175,000 is brought to Assets and Procurement. So that differs from every other committee, which is at the key decision level of 500,000. And I would also suggest that with procurement and property, if you were looking at a lease, the £175,000 is very quickly reached if you have a 21-year lease, for example. So this is simply bringing the Assets and Procurement Committee in line with our other the procurement rules that apply to our other committees as well. You'll read in the report that the media protocol also has been reviewed. The main elements of the protocol have remained unchanged, but there are some revisions to improve the way in which the council manages its communications and also better reflect the Code on Recommended Publicity, which is statutory guidance. So that those are the main changes. We're also proposing the creation of a social media protocol. That is something which is seen as good practice. From a monitoring officer perspective, I don't suffer from lots of complaints about social media, but many of my colleagues do, and it was a prime area of complaint at my previous authorities. So I'm pleased to see that Cambridgeshire isn't affected by the same disease which we've experienced elsewhere, but it's always good to have a protocol so that members can know where they are in respect of that, rather than leaving it when it can be really vague in relation to the code of conduct. And the final recommendation is to appoint members to a working group so that we can get input of members on issues such as this at an early stage before bringing a report to committee. And we think that would be really helpful to officers in deciding what we did and what we proposed. Chair, that's the report. Thank you.
Splendid. Thank you very much. Questions and comments? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I support all of these. I can't see any issues with these. I just need to point out that on the Appendix 1, as you spoke, that we've omitted all the names of appropriate social media channels. Just on 5.8.1, we haven't. So I don't know if that was just missed off or whether we're going to leave that in, because it's saying the council will use most appropriate social media channels, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, WhatsApp. So it's still in there. So I didn't know whether you needed to remove that as you have done with the other parts.
Yeah, we'll take all of those out. Thank you.
Splendid. Thank you. Oh, gosh. Councillor Machini.
Very, very briefly, thank you, Chair. With respect to the working group, I have spoken with my colleague, Councillor Boulat, who used to be on this committee before, and she would like to be put forward for that. So if we could have that, that would be great.
Splendid. Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. On the media protocol, this may already be there, in which case I apologise, but there has been stuff in the media recently about somebody needing or wanting to take legal advice and whether or not the authority was going to pay for that. If a member thinks that something has been published which is libelous, can they choose to seek their own legal advice, and will that be reimbursed? And equally, if it applies to officers, can you assure us that you will provide the support that they will need for that?
Thank you very much. The council does have insurance to cover issues of libel and defamation to individuals who are performing their roles as part of the council. The general provision, not often used. Libel proceedings are defamation proceedings are very expensive. So before councils take them, they usually take other steps in relation to preventing statements being made, usually via an injunction. There are arrangements in place to put in place legal sanctions which protect officers and members. It's very rare for a council to pursue a libel action, and usually what will happen is that individual members or officers will do that. But ahead of that, lots of councils have issued proceedings against individual complainants, vexatious complainants, persistent complainants, complainants that have harassed members and officers, particularly through social media websites, to use injunctions to prevent them from doing those things. So usually legal action focuses around that from the council perspective, and we effectively indemnify our members and officers against that. There's generally not a provision for libel. So where we are looking at doing an action like that, where councils have done that in the past, they require specific authorization from members to do that, because obviously it's quite expensive and it generally will relate to one individual. Some people's insurance policies will cover that and some won't, but libel is one of those things which is very rarely taken through the courts by, I would say, ordinary people. It's generally limited to people who have the funds to do that. So generally speaking, we look to pursue other actions rather than libel. It is possible to do, but we would be bringing a report to members if that was what was being proposed.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? In which case, if I could ask you to agree the recommendations at number 1 to 5, 6, which is recommendations of changes to full council. Has everybody agreed with those? Yep. Thank you very much. The next is to agree to the development of social media protocol for the council. All in favour? Thank you. And lastly, to establish and appoint members to a constitution working group as set out in paragraphs 220 to 223. So we have a volunteer from the Conservative group, Councillor Ambrose Smith. Thank you very much. Myself from the Liberal Democrat group, Councillor Dr. Boulat from the Labour group. And I wonder, Councillor Taylor, if Councillor Ferguson, as my glorious predecessor, might wish to be the independent nominee.
It's going to be Councillor Tom Sarterson.
Oh, it is. Okay, lovely. All right, everybody happy with that, the establishment of that and the appointment of those members? Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Councillor Boulat as a member of that group, but she doesn't have to be a member of this committee to be on that working group.
In terms of appointments to working groups, we can allow appointments outside the committee. Yeah, and she's a sub anyway. So.
Good. Thank you very much, everybody. That's that item dealt with. We move on to item number 4, which is the governance review and the implementation of recommendations. Could I ask our Service Director of Legal and Governance, Ms. Duncan, to present the report, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the next report. Members will recall that the changes to the constitution that required full council approval have been through full council, and this is, I can say, the fag end, but that's not the fag end. The remainder of the recommendations which didn't require full council approval. These are the recommendations from the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny report. So within here you have, within the report, you have the recommendations and officers' proposals how to implement recommendations. Obviously, if members choose to implement these or not is entirely a matter for them. So I shall just quickly run through that. In terms of the first one, member and officer training, in terms of our governance structures, it's really important that members and officers have a good grip of the governance and how to operate it, really. So the focus around training and development is really aimed at both officers and members, so that officers have a good awareness of member officer roles, where those are and where the line is. We think it's really important as a local government officer that you have a political awareness and understand how to deal with elected members, and understand that elected members' priorities are not necessarily officers' priorities, and vice versa. And report writing as well, which we've done quite a lot of work on with Democratic Services recently, to make sure that members, when they receive a report, receive relevant information that is understandable, and can be assured of the quality of the assessments that go into that. So we've done quite a lot on that. We still think we've got some way to go on that to get it to where we want it to be. So from an officer perspective, those are the things which we will be focusing on over the next few months. And in particular, we've introduced a new report template, new decision-making guidance for officers, so that we can really sort of nail down report writing for members. And it will be interesting to see when members see the new report templates, if they find them better to read than they may have been used to. So the CFGS also talked about member training. We have a limited budget for member training, which obviously is a prudent approach to take, but we need to make good use of that training budget for members. At the moment, it's £10,000 a year, and with 60 odd members, that can be stretched somewhat. We do a lot of our own training, and that's a really good way of helping members understand some of the basic stuff that, you know, we take for granted, but actually if we haven't told members about it, they won't necessarily know. So those things which, you know, if you are in an organization, you take for granted, when we get new members, that induction is very important. So again, you know, sharing that understanding around what's a member's role, understanding the political drivers behind that, understanding what an officer role is. So, you know, the difference between what an officer is seeking to achieve and has to achieve, and the obligations on them, and what members are seeking to achieve. And I think that sometimes an understanding of that is really useful. Work programming and prioritization. It's a feature of councils that we want to do a lot of stuff at the same time, but actually delivery is really important, so that we can understand how we prioritize things and how we program things. Questioning skills, particularly as we've got a committee system here, we don't have a separate scrutiny function. So, you know, we want members to not only consider the reports, but to ask the insightful questions about how we do that, how we elicit evidence, and getting that scrutineer function into the committee system as well. And that is allied to interrogating, understanding data and evidence, which, you know, when you get it in the report, sometimes it's very difficult. You know, I see this as I experience this as an officer. You know, you don't want to appear silly by asking silly questions, although there is no reason, there's no such thing as a silly question, but helping members interpret that data so that they can ask the right questions of the officers when they're going through the report. We want to focus on corporate parenting as well, really to mainstream that into our organisation. We're all corporate parents, both officers and members, and it's really important for our young people that they understand that we have a collective responsibility to them. And certainly, members will, if they were at full council, when hearing from our care leavers, understand how important it is that they feel supported in that. And so that's another area that we can address. And again, equality, diversity and inclusion is an area which we need to work on. So that is something we want to program in. We need members' guidance in terms of how they want to do that, and that question is posed within the report, so that we get good briefing programs that members will attend on. So we want to hear from members as to how we can do that best for you, because there's no point in me saying, well, I think it's going to be 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon every 2 weeks, and that's not how members want to receive the training. So it's really important we hear from you on that. I think in terms of the review of the member officer protocol, now is a good time to do that. We've had the best value guidance issued in draft, and that's a key area of it. Where you see governance failure typically is where relationships have broken down between members and officers. So I think actually us looking at that, how we conduct our relationships together, is a timely thing to do. And we are going to be introducing the report writing guide as well. So the next recommendation is around spokes meetings. Members who've been here a little while will remember how spokes used to work, and we still have those terms of reference in place at the moment. The CFGS suggested that they need to be refocused around actually not being a rehash, or rather an advance meeting about what's going to happen at the next committee, but actually take a longer term view where they're more akin to those of you who work in the cabinet system, around alongside akin to portfolio holder briefings, really, where you see issues coming up, you discuss them with the relevant officers, and then you shape the agenda moving forward from that. So we don't think we need to do very much in terms of the spokes terms of reference to do that, but this plays into the members' seminar programs as well, to make sure that we're taking briefing items off committee agendas, and actually we're sharing those more widely in terms of information items. And obviously just retaining chairs and vice chairs as we have at the moment to focus on meetings and agenda planning. So the spokes meetings, to which all groups are entitled to, will be effectively a policy briefing session, and to look long term in terms of what's coming up on the agendas, which will better manage our work programs. I think that no surprises approach, so that members aren't landed with reports at the last minute, they don't know what's in them, they don't know what's coming, is avoided, and that applies to all groups in relation to that. In relation to member working groups, we have 44 at the moment. I think it's worth looking at those in terms of each spokes meeting, looking at those and reviewing those and seeing if that's still where we want to be. A bit of a housekeeping session, really. I mean, it's probably something we should do annually in relation to that. Then the last I've covered reserve meetings. I better pick that up. So in terms of recommendations to the CFGS, they looked at the way that we currently do enhanced scrutiny and policy development. So as I've said, we do that within the committee structure at the moment, and that's the way that we get that robustness in terms of our governance into our decision-making process. So if you're working with a cabinet system, you'd have cabinet making the decisions, and then scrutinising decisions that they'd made, or doing pre-scrutiny on the decisions. Here we do it all at one committee, and it's important that that's embedded. Lack of scrutiny is a governance issue, more generally for authorities. So getting that governance into committee meetings is really important. And sometimes we have lengthy agendas which don't allow for appropriate levels of scrutiny on those. So the suggestion from the CFGS was to use reserve meetings, although the current scheduling would remain. I think then we moved to the social care decision making. That was our recommendation in terms of that, is that's a do nothing, because quite frankly it was unformed. We'll keep it under review and see if there's anything else that needs to be done, but we weren't able to work that up in a way that was could become a workable proposal. And the final recommendation was request that the Chair of Adults and Health Committee hold scrutiny meetings on reserve dates to alleviate some of the pressure in the agenda there. So, Chair, I think that's sort of all of the recommendations, having a brief talk through them, but obviously happy to answer any questions.
Splendid. Thank you very much. Right. Members, questions and comments. Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Not used to doing this. Recommendation 2. Are you being over prescriptive at this stage on saying the joint administration spokes and the Conservative spokes? Could that not have been worded differently to that? If we're changing the constitution.
In terms of, sorry, I'm being a bit dim.
Don't say that. It's stated here that the administration spokes and the Conservative spokes could meet together or could not meet together, could meet separately. That not always be the same as this, will it, going forward? Not always. So.
Yes, so I think it's just the removal of the words joint administration and Conservative. It's a question of whether the spokes meet together, whoever they are, or whether they meet separately, whether they're in administration or in opposition.
That's that.
That's an excellent point. I think we'll take that on board.
And I think it should be throughout whatever we do. It should be in that.
Absolutely,
well. Yeah.
That's a really good point.
And also recommendation 3 regarding the working groups, the 45 working groups we now have. Not the 44, but you say that we should be sorting out a spokes meeting. We'd be able to reduce those. If the spokes meetings are separate, Conservatives and joint administration, how are you going to come to an agreement with how you reduce those working groups?
Thank you. Yes, and guilty as charged on the increasing the working groups. I walked into that. I think that in terms of those, we would, where briefing together is possible from an officer perspective, it's really good because actually it builds trust between spokes on a committee. However, there are times when individual groups will want their own policy briefings on stuff. So we want to respect that as well. And there's a degree of confidentiality within that, where you're being briefed by officers, they don't go and say, actually, so-and-so said this. So with the working groups, I think that actually that may be an occasion where we just ask for the spokes to meet together and we'll run through the working groups and say, okay, what's this one doing? How do people feel about that? Is it performing? Could it be moved into something else? Do we need it? So actually getting them to meet together on those occasions would be quite helpful. I think on some areas we might get cross-party consensus, not that everyone will be sitting around the campfire singing Kumbaya, but on those relatively, uncontentious political issues, I think that we probably could have a joint meeting there and that would make sense.
So should that be stated in recommendation 3?
Yes, I think that can be dealt with.
Splendid, thank you for that. Who else would like to? Councillor Machini.
Sorry, are we at the debating stage or at the asking question stage? In which case, here I am. No, I feel somewhat it is necessary for me to argue on behalf of both Richard and Susan, who I have both spoken to individually about this, and they have asked me to, and the joint administration as a whole, to make a strong case against recommendation I, with which they do not agree. It is very important for us to say, although this is not my committee, nor has it ever been, that as we know, this report has been with us for a while. There has been discussion about it. There has been redrafting. The Centre for Governance themselves have taken their time with some of it, but some of the issues, and the issue that resulted in the drafting of recommendation I is an issue that has been with us for quite a long time. How to manage health scrutiny within that particular committee. And it is something that, whilst absolutely not agreeing that Richard and Susan didn't do it properly in their committee at any point, they have accepted that it was something to look at, and they have worked for the best part of the last 2 and a bit years to make this situation better, and they have implemented their plan, which has been going for quite a while. At the moment, the agenda and the managing of the dates is something that they have already looked at and they don't want changed for them. As a result, having the recommendation as it is, which dictates every other meeting what you do, is not something that would fit with the program that they have. And therefore, I would like to ask that the joint administration doesn't vote for that particular recommendation. We are happy with everything else.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Sorry,
comments?
can I just get that right, Chair?
So perhaps I can be clear.
No, the point that Councillor Machini made right at the very end.
Okay,
That
good.
she was requesting that the joint administration don't vote for something. So you are asking your members
I
to.
am recommending for the joint administration to vote this down.
Okay, that's not what you said.
I don't have the power to mandate anything.
That's what I thought. That's why I raised it. I thought it was odd.
Any other comments? I am aware that we haven't discussed one particular item, which is member seminar program and how best to manage its reinstatement. So for those who will remember, member seminars used to take place in person on Friday mornings. I think the makeup of the council is such now that that's not any longer feasible, or rather wouldn't produce very many people attending. So does anybody have thoughts about alternative provision and timings?
Just to ask a question, why is the makeup of the, just tell me, why is the makeup now different?
I think there are many more people who have 9-to-5 jobs that can't take time off on Friday mornings.
Even by Zoom or by whatever?
Well, I suppose that is a possibility, but that's why I'm asking for your views. Councillor Taylor, you've got your hand up first.
Thank you, Chair. Previously, I found it very hard to attend the Friday morning seminars that we used to have. In fact, I don't think I ever attended one because I worked. I know we have tried the lunchtime, and I think it has worked for quite a majority of people because they are able to join in online, because online has been a godsend to us, virtual meetings. I think it does work through a lunchtime period, and some members are able to stop work, maybe have their sandwich and join in with the training. It's going to be very hard to fit this with everyone, but hopefully, you know, some members will be able to join, maybe not all, but if, you know, it's going to be hard to fit it in with everyone.
Yes, I agree. Who had that? Councillor Wilson.
I think lunchtimes and on Teams would be very sensible. I'd also like us to record them all so that people who can't watch or can't attend at the time can watch subsequently. I am concerned, I think there is one coming up fairly soon, which, because it's an external speaker, we can't record it, which I think is unfortunate. If we're paying for this person to come, why can't we record what they say and then share it with everybody else? I think it would also be helpful for democratic services to record who attends and name and shame if there are particular participants who never are able to come, but able to come rather than choose to come, and then speak to them and see what other alternatives might be better for them.
Thank you for that, Councillor Machini.
very, very quickly, you know, I am one of those people with a 9 to 5 job that kind of has to, you know, whilst Zoom and Teams do help sometimes because they remove the travel requirement from, you know, so if you need to take an hour off, you can take an hour off rather than 5. Still, that's not the solution to all the problems, because sometimes you just can't be sitting on Zoom during working hours because you're working. So, and I'm somebody who I very, very much like going to places personally if I can. I get Zoom fatigue. Sometimes I find it difficult to remember or listen or absorb as much if I'm not in the same room with the speaker. At the same time, I find it impossibly difficult to get here all the time for everything I would like to attend. So it's just an acknowledgement of the problem. In my opinion, it doesn't have an easy answer, because if it did, we would have found it. Overall, I think the more training you want people to attend, the more likely it is that it will be easier on Teams. I would just like to argue for a little bit of balance and ad hoc if we can, because it's never always obvious. One way is always better, and that's all the thoughts I have. And I know everybody knows this, and I know it's being considered. It's just, you know, that's how it is.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Goldsack.
Yeah, following on from that, I understand how, you know, it's difficult to get. It's very difficult to get here. However, one of the things I was thinking here is there not the facility in Teams to literally create a team? So if we were to go out and say if the officers were to go out and say we'd like to run a member seminar on something to do with the environment, just as using that as an example, you know, something coming up, then members can opt to come into that and therefore be part of that team, and therefore they can follow it, they can catch up, they can ask the questions remote, etc., etc., etc. I don't think, and I'm going to be bold here, I don't think us members are as aware of the functionality of Teams as our members, and I think we could benefit from a member seminar on the full use of Teams. I know that's rather ironic, but I think that is a fact. Yeah, I like it. So I think there is more functionality there that we could use to enable better engagement with those that can't make every meeting.
Thank you for that. So hybrid meetings, really, the combination. Splendid. Anything else that anybody wants to add before I move to, Councillor Coutts?
I don't know if this is relevant, but as a member of the cohort of 2021 joiners, just the mention of training for new members there, can I just say thank you? I was hit by 25 training appointments as soon as my diary opened. I thought, gosh, this is going to be busy, but actually there's a lot to learn, and most of the training was very effective indeed. So thank you.
Do you want to add something?
If I can, I think the message we're receiving from members is a mixed economy would be good. And I think Councillor Wilson's point about having the sessions available on demand for members as well would be good for people who can't attend. I'm delighted to hear the induction programme was successful with the new members, but of course that's quite a lot to take in, and I think that maybe with the member development group we can do some thinking about scheduling some of that over the period of year, doing refresher training so that we have a more managed programme to the whole year, and we're not expecting a huge commitment of time straight away when you've just gone through an election, which can be for members quite intense, especially, you know, especially if you have other commitments. So if I'm taking it correctly, Chair, I'm hearing we'd like a mixed economy, and we can certainly do some of this work as well with the member development working group as we move into the next election, which I'm sure no one knows is more than you guys, isn't that far away now. So in terms of the induction programme, I think that's definitely something we will be taking on board as well. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you. Well, if there are no further comments or questions, I'm going to move to the vote on the recommendations, and I propose, given that nobody has spoken against recommendations A to H, to take those all together. So can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Ambrose Smith. All in favour? That's carried. We move then to the recommendation number I, which is the chair of adults and health committees to hold health scrutiny meetings on the reserved dates for adult and health committee. Councillor Machini, you've spoken against this, so I'm going to move to the vote. Please raise your hand if you agree with this recommendation. 1, 2, 3. Right, thank you. Thank you for that. Right, 3 are in favour of the recommendation. Please show if you are against this recommendation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that recommendation falls rather. Thank you for that. We now move on to agenda item number 5, which is a review of complaints received on the Members' Code of Conduct, September 2023. Ms. Duncan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I think the headline of this report, here's nothing to see here. We have no outstanding complaints. We received 26 complaints since my last report to you at committee. They all related to essentially one event and have all been dealt with within our time, the timetable we set for ourselves in dealing with them. I think that what I'd like to draw members' attention to is that we have introduced a new system in terms of processing complaints to make sure that complaints are dealt with for both the complainant and for the member concerned as quickly as possible. And I think that this is a good demonstration of how effectively that is working. As the monitoring officer, I'm not seeing trends really in terms of complaints. And certainly what I would say about multiple complaints, where we have those as we've had in this case, a multiple complaint doesn't necessarily indicate that there's a significant issue. It sometimes can just be that a number of people feel the same way about one particular issue and have chosen to demonstrate that to the council through this particular route of complaint. So as I said, I'm not sure there's very much to see here. We don't have huge member standard issues, which is excellent, and long may it continue, but just to update you on the complaints for this quarter.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Can I just clarify, and you may or may not choose to answer this. I think you referred to this being related to all these complaints being related to one event. Does that mean that each complaint was from a different member of the public? And is there anything significant about that that we should be aware of?
Yes, they all come from different members of the public. So once I receive a complaint in from a different separate individual, it constitutes a separate complaint. No, I think from my perspective, where members of the public are aggrieved with a decision that the council has made, we are seeing more multiple complaints, essentially in respect of the decision. Members of the public will try and hang it on a member conduct issue, but actually they're dissatisfied with the decision itself, which has other routes to deal with. So in those circumstances, we have to look at whether there's a breach of the code, which fairly obviously in most of these particular circumstances there isn't. And one of the assessment criteria we apply is whether the complaint is being dealt with through any other means as well. So, but sometimes I think people see this as a way of stopping the decision from being implemented or raising their concerns in this particular way. And it's not unusual for councils to receive multiple complaints, especially when there are a number of people who disagree with the decision that's being made.
Thank you for that. There being no further comment or question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Chair, Emma, regarding these 26 complaints, how much officer time did that take to actually sort this out?
Thank you very much. We have our process is really very streamlined now. So we produce one decision notice which relates, they were all exactly the same complaint. So obviously the content of the complaint has been circulated. So in essence, they're really easy to assess. We produce one decision notice. Having said that, you still have to read the complaints. You still have to send it to the independent person. You still have to notify the member that they're getting these complaints in, and you still have to do the other side with the complainant to show that the process is being appropriately followed. I don't keep a record of the time necessarily spent on that. I don't think it would be probably in dealing with each of those complaints, we're talking 3 or 4 hours each. So just to do the basic admin on them and to oversee it, making sure that we're dealing with it in the correct manner. So they're not unsubstantial amounts. I think that what I might do where we have our complaints page about members, I think there is a perception that the more complaints you put in, the more seriously the authority will take it. And that's not always the case. That will depend very much on what the essence of the complaint is about, because not all complaints are justified, and we don't find breaches very often. But equally, if there is a complaint that needs to be dealt with, we need to treat it with the serious it requires. So I think that there may be something about adding something on the front of the page there, the landing page, to say, please note, if you are considering making a complaint about members, the number of complaints we receive have no impact on the decision that is made. And I mean, my last authority, we had 70 complaints about one member, but we'd reached the same decision if we'd had one complaint about the member, because it's the quality, it's whether there's been a breach or not. And lots of people complaining about it don't necessarily mean there's a breach. It means they're upset about it, and there are ways of addressing that, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's a breach.
So to answer my question about 3 weeks for these 72 people, these 3 weeks for these 26.
Yes, I think that would be about right.
Thank you.
Yes, not as you say, not insignificant. Good. Anybody else on complaints? In which case we move to the next item, which is the agenda plan, which you are invited to comment on. Perhaps we could have a little bit about the first item, which is live action plan to mitigate the risks of intimidation and abusive behaviours towards members and officers. I assume that means by members of the public rather than each other.
I think it's wide enough to encompass both. Yes, I think that's actually that's obviously the action plan that's coming back. We promised to report back to members on that. I think that we are again seeing an increase in these behaviours. It's not going away, it's not getting better, and I think that before the next election we will see more of that potentially. So I think that's going to be a useful thing for members to keep an eye on, and making sure that we're providing as a council as the most support to members that we can in what can be really, really difficult circumstances sometimes with their decision making. So we'll bring that back with an update for you, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. If there is no other comment or questions, I will draw the committee meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, particularly the substitutes. I hope you found it inspiring. And thank you very much, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.